being like, well, it was hard, so I'm not going to do it anymore. I'm like, what are you talking about? You've just lost out on such a beautiful, joyful part of life because you've decided that it's just too hard.
Yeah, I had no intention of marrying you when we went on that first date. I had an intention of getting to know somebody interesting, which is exactly how people should treat a first date. Be excited about getting to know an interesting person, and you never know what could happen. I had no intention of marrying you.
Second date you did, but first date,
yes.
No. We go into it with this list of preconceived ideas of what we think our partner should be. And in reality, that's not the person you're going to end up with.
Instead of putting pressure on the one, the Gottman said that there are actually 500,000 compatible people that you will actually marry.
500,000. So there's 499,000.
Yes.
999.
Other people you could be married to rather than me.
It's good to know.
Good to know. I think I'm so stubborn that I would never divorce you because I said I would never divorce you. So no matter how bad it got, I would just be like, I'm sticking through with this because I said I was.
I don't know why, but that annoyed me. When I look at our marriage, even though it's definitely not perfect, it's perfect for us. And I think you struggle with defensiveness.
Yeah, well, now I'm going to get defensive that you said it for me.
I knew that was going to happen.
It was a Ross and Rachel situation because we were on a break.
It wasn't a Ross and Rachel situation. Anyway, it kind of was, but it wasn't. Men tend to focus on actions and logic. I call fucking bullshit on that. Good.
Men are not smarter than women.
You're not. Emotional intimacy is perhaps far greater of importance than physical intimacy in any way, shape, or form.
And it leads to physical intimacy.
Damn straight it does. Oh, love that you learnt that.
Yeah. Put all the clothes away yesterday.
Oh my God, I loved you so much. It kind of it turned me on a little bit. I'm not going to lie. Welcome back to another episode of First Rounds on Me. If you are anything like us, you probably have a playlist of your favorite podcasts that you turn to for inspiration and insight. Among those gems for us are Diary of a CEO and On Purpose with Jay Shetty, both of which dive into some truly fascinating and in-depth conversations. So my darling, do you want to tell me why you wanted to have this conversation today?
Yes. And hi, babe.
Hi.
Glad to be on the show with you. My
Always.
favorite shows are with you. But yeah, so I think, as you know, on my morning commutes, I listen to these two podcasts in particular, and I learned so much. And I thought, we always talk about these topics and we give our opinion and our viewpoint, which is great. And I think carries a lot of weight. But when you hear from people who are so experienced with so much thorough research in the field and giving their perspective on dating and human connection, I thought, why not take some of their cliff notes and give our perspective on it? Because they come from different walks of lives. They've obviously been doing this for a lot longer than us. And they kind of say the same things as us, but they have a lot of data to back it up that is just endless. And I just was so excited to dig into it with you.
Well, I think one of the things, especially upon doing research for this, because you definitely are more of a podcast listener than I am, was the fact of the correlation or the relation of the amount of things that we've said and the amount of things that they say. So I'm excited to jump into it.
Yeah, and to give some context, I know Jay Shetty does work with Match, so we appreciate that. And we're not trying to steal his stuff, but we just love it so much that we're going to give our spin on it.
Heck yeah. All right, so the first of all, I want to touch on an episode of The Diary of a CEO, which featured Doctors John and Julie Gottman, who these people are experts. I mean, they've had like 50 years of experience in the field, and I think they can also predict a divorce within like a 95% percentage rate, which is wild to think about.
Yeah, and when I was listening to their podcast, so obviously I just throw the podcast on based on the title.
Yes.
And when I was listening to it, I was like, oh my God, these people know so much about dating and relationships. And then I watched the video side of it, and it's this like lovely old Jewish couple, and then, they're not old, but older. And they were like in their 70s and just talking about the history of human connection and dating. And I was like, okay, we need to dig into this in particular.
Damn straight. All right, well, the first thing I wanted to dive into is the impact of dating apps, because they spoke on that quite heavily within that episode. And obviously we are a dating app, and it's always very fascinating to hear people with such experience talk about things, especially considering the fact that I have to assume that they've never used a dating app in their life, right? So the Gottmans discussed how dating apps have drastically changed the way that people meet, presenting an abundance of choices that often leads to this paradox of choices, something that we talk about quite often. They also mentioned how dating apps can foster a more transactional mindset towards relationships, where partners are swiped away quickly, often due to superficial criteria. That instant gratification culture, compounded by the endless scrolling and swiping, can lead people to not fully invest in the person that they're dating or constantly seek out the next best option. Does that sound familiar?
It sounds so familiar. And I think I'm going to use a word that really fits with me in particular. Is I'm going to dumb it down because they say it so astutely. So I'm just going to dumb it down. But yeah, that is kind of what we always talk about, is part of the reasons why people our age didn't like dating apps was because at some point we were burnt out. And we didn't know that until we actually got burnt out. And I think one of those reasons is the paradox of choice. We're always looking for perfection, which, if you're honest with yourself, there's no such thing as perfection when it comes to dating and to finding a partner. And yeah, I just think that we're always looking for something better. And I think there's nothing better than what. So we're always looking for something better than what. And I think if you find somebody that's worth exploring and worth getting to know and seeing how interesting they are, once you hit a roadblock, why not try breaking through the roadblock, and why not try seeing how amazing it could be on the other side? Because I think that's one of the most beautiful things in a relationship is once you get over a hurdle with somebody, it's like you always say, like, the grass isn't always green on the other side, but getting through a brick wall could be utopia. So like, why not see what goes on there? And I think with dating apps, with social media, we've gotten this ease of, if something's difficult, just push it away and go to the next easiest thing. And with dating, it's just gotten scary that that's what we do now.
Oh, heck yeah. Well, the saying that I say is the grass is greener on the side that you water it, which I think is really applicable to this area in particular, because it's true. It's like, it's the combination of like dating apps, it's a combination of social media, but it's also just the combination of the world of which we live in now, where people are always looking to the next best thing, and they're always looking for that sense of instant gratification. They're not holding out for like long-term joy. They want that like big spike of adrenaline or serotonin, which they feel like they're not going to get if they do go through those roadblocks or if they do wait something out. But in reality, I mean, we know from personal experience, considering the fact that we're married, that's the most fulfilling aspect of it, is being able to build your life with somebody and to get through hardship together. And so I think when I see people, like even my friends, maybe not, today, but a couple of years ago, just being like, well, it was hard, so I'm not going to do it anymore. I'm like, what are you talking about? You've just lost out on such a beautiful, joyful part of life because you've decided that it's just too hard.
Yeah, and I think another big thing is the ease in which dating apps allows us to see so many people at once, where before they existed, finding a potential partner or a potential person of interest was all proximity based, or some type of friend of a friend or relationship of a relationship. And you were kind of just excited to meet somebody to see how interesting they were. And now it's so easy that unless they check every single box right away, we know that there's going to be another swipe that is going to maybe check every box.
See, but that, I think, is another big problem, is this checklist that people have, right? Yeah. We've talked about this a couple of times. It's like people go into dating thinking, okay, I need this, 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 and this, and this to be able to be happy. But in reality, like, yeah, morals and values, 100%. Of course, you want to align with somebody on that. But this checklist that we make up in our head far and few between does it actually match up with the person you end up with. And so I always try to tell people when I'm talking to them, I'm like, don't go into dating with these high expectations or these massive checklists, because it's never going to end out well for you, because you're always going to find an excuse to let that person go and move on to the next.
100%. We sound like the Gottmans.
That's such a compliment. Oh my God. But I will have to say, I know that you don't always love me bringing it back to the app, but I feel like exactly what they said within that episode was so heavily based in the reason why you created the app. Correct me if I'm wrong. Like all of those things, all of those pain points.
Yeah, and I think actually we're seeing most dating apps use new terminology, try and create these new features that center around the keyword everybody uses now is intentionality, which I think we used first, but they're just using that word of date with intentionality. And intentionality, like we always say, can mean whatever you want it to mean, as long as you're being genuine about your intentions on the app. So if you're intentional about hooking up with somebody and you're both on the same page, that is amazing.
Live your life.
But just be intentional and don't use the gamification of it. Don't use the app for your own personal serotonin, your own validation, because that's when it gets sticky, and yeah, you just don't want that.
Before we kind of end this little section, I want to know if you could go back before we met, would you do anything different about like our first date or how it was all set up?
No, because, I always had the preconceived notion that I'm creating this concept, and I wanted it to happen that way, and maybe I manifested it in a way. But no, I think it played out perfectly.
Yeah.
We did exactly what it was supposed to do without the intention, because I had no intention of marrying you when we went on that first date. I had an intention of getting to know somebody interesting, which is exactly how people should treat a first date. Be excited about getting to know an interesting person, and you never know what could happen. I had no intention of marrying you.
Second date you did, but first date,
yes.
no. But no, 100%. I think I would reiterate that, and I would also, emphasize that, and I'd also say, like, be down for an adventure. That's what our first date was. It was like we went from matching to being out on the date like 4 hours later. And I was like, what a whirlwind, especially in today's day and age. And it was like that sense of adventure. That was the serotonin. That was like the joy that I got out of it. So just go for it.
Exactly.
It's up to you.
Okay, I'm up. Okay, so the Gottmans highlighted the need for intentionality, like we just said, in relationships. So encouraging listeners to prioritize emotional connection and compatibility rather than superficial traits. So I guess my question is, how do you think people can balance between seeking convenience in dating and fostering a genuine emotional connection with somebody?
I mean, I think we automatically have the convenience of dating through the technological tools of dating apps, right? We have that ability, like you just kind of touched on it earlier, of being able to meet so many people outside of our normal circles or our normal scope. And that's the convenience element of it. But I think that it kind of just goes back to what we were just saying earlier. Like you have to be intentional about what you want in this dating world. If you're going out there and you want to hook up, great. If you just want a summer fling, amazing. If you're looking for a long-term relationship, incredible. But be intentional about that and be intentional as you go through those steps of dating. What about you?
Well, actually, I'm reading this, but I want to make sure we get this right. So from what I understood of the Gottmans, it says they emphasize emotional compatibility. And from what I listened to in the episode, it said something along the lines of like, you're never going to actually like somebody or be connected to a person that you're very compatible with. It's actually the opposite. And you know how we say like opposites attract? So it might be emotional compatibility, but I think you're more likely to end up with somebody who's not maybe physically compatible to you. And I think from what they said was like, when you see somebody who you potentially want to procreate with.
Such a technical term. Procreate.
Have sex with. Create a baby with.
Yes.
The, I guess, biology in us wants that baby to have a diverse, well-rounded group of genes. So if somebody is compatible to you, they have the similar genes that you have, and your baby won't be as diverse as you want it to be. And I think they are big proponents on you're probably going to be physically attracted to somebody who's not as compatible as you. But the emotional side, it's interesting that they have that here.
Well, I want to touch on that physical compatibility because I find that so interesting. That like biologically we're wired to be attracted to people who are perhaps not the most compatible with us. I will say, even though we have a lot of similarities, perhaps in a lot of ways we're not compatible. But I also think that the quote unquote flaws or the quote unquote things that we're missing in each other, we kind of bring together and we help each other.
Yeah, I think
fill those goals.
But I think it was always a worry of mine where we were always emotionally compatible in the sense that our morals and values align, that we want kids and we want to be married and we don't ever want to get divorced.
We want to help people, like all of those types of things.
I think, to be 100% honest with you, I always thought, oh, this feels right, but you don't like sports. You don't like fitness as much as I do.
I've gotten better.
You don't eat meat, right? So all things that aren't a big deal. I was like, oh, we're not really compatible in this sense. And, sports and fitness to me are like, my two fuck around things that I love. And after listening to these experts, it's like, oh, it makes more sense that you and I, in our hobbies and interests, are not compatible at all. Like you love the arts.
Love the arts, love music, love literature, love all of these things which you're not super fussed by.
Yeah.
And I whilst I can tolerate sports, not my favorite activity to do on a Sunday, but I think it's like in that where we bring such diverse things to the table that makes our marriage so beautiful.
Yeah.
And so whole.
And I think if it feels right, let it be right. Don't think about why it could be wrong. And that's kind of what I was doing. I was like, it feels right, but on paper it doesn't make sense. So why am I fighting this?
I should be with a woman who likes sports. I should be with a man who's artsy and does all these types of things. And that goes back to exactly what we were saying at the start of the podcast. We go into it with this list of preconceived ideas of what we think our partner should be. And in reality, that's not the person you're going to end up with.
This one I really liked.
Tell me.
Because I always believed this. So the concept of the one. So what the Gottman said, they address the myth of the one, noting that this idea can put immense pressure on relationships.
Good with words.
The concept implies that there is a perfect person who will complete or fulfill you in every way, which is unrealistic. Instead, the Gottmans believe that love is something that grows over time through shared experiences, trust, and commitment, rather than being predestined or perfect from the start. Before we get into this, I think it's so fascinating to hear them say this, because if you think about how people got married back in the day, whether it was a prearranged marriage or I think people used to be set up for like family power and dynamics, and they probably didn't even know each other, let alone like each other in the beginning, but they grew a family. And when they became, 70, 80 years old and they're about to die, the most important person to them was their wife or husband, because I think they just built that trust and compatibility and love for each other over time. And I think that goes back to what we were talking about earlier, where we don't even if we do like somebody in the beginning, we don't give each other time to let that love grow, and it's just instant gratification. But going back to the concept of the one, I totally agree. I don't think there is a one. I know sometimes you think that I'm your one.
No, I don't. I think that I think you gathered that from like when I went home after our first date and I was like, I'm going to marry them. Because there was something inside of me that was like, I would want to grow with that human being. It wasn't like, oh my God, this is the perfect one that was dropped down from the heavens. It was more so like, I could see building a life with him. I could see giving that a real go, a real shot, a bigger of a shot than I've ever given anybody else in my life. But yeah, I don't think that there is a one. I mean, I think it's a really beautiful concept. And I think that rom-coms and literature and movies in general have painted that fairy tale for us. And I think it's a good thing for people to hold on to, just in terms of like believing in love. But it goes back to having, again, that list of, this is what my one would do. My one would never do that to me. And I hear that all the time. My person would never do that to me. I'm like, but they probably fucking would. And it's only because they're human. People make mistakes. People fuck up. People will do things that are complete opposites to them because they're scared or they're fearful or they're worried. Like, you can't judge. You can't sit there and say that my person wouldn't do that, because, like I said, they probably would.
And I'm not going to misquote here.
Okay.
People could listen to the episode.
All right.
Instead of putting pressure on the one, the Gottman said that there are actually 500,000 compatible people that you will actually marry.
500,000.
500,000. So if you're looking for the one, look for one of 500,000.
Look for like 10.
There's 500,000 out there that are a good match for you.
500,000.
500,000.
So there's 499,000.
Yes.
999.
Other people you could be married to rather than me.
It's good to know.
Good to know. And they had a key takeaway. The idea of the one can set up expectations that are impossible to meet. True love isn't found in a perfect person, but built in a relationship where both partners commit to growth, understanding, and mutual respect.
I mean, don't you agree with that in terms of our marriage, though? Like, I mean, we always had a really strong love for each other. I think sometimes that got in the way of logic occasionally, especially in the early days of our relationship. But like every month, every day, every year that goes by, I find myself more and more in love with you. Not because you've changed, not because you've brought anything crazy new to the table. It's because we consistently go through life and we consistently face challenges that we overcome together. We have all these beautiful new shared experiences, and we're also building a company together, which is in of itself massively formative.
Massively. I'm still up?
I think so.
Before we got together, well, you kind of touched on this. Before we got together, did you believe in the idea of the one?
No.
Okay, that's easy.
Yeah.
Do you think believing in the one sets people up for disappointment when relationships inevitably go through tough times?
Yeah, 100%. Because like you said, as soon as people see a sign of like a quote unquote red flag or any kind of like roadblock, they're like, I'm out of here. It's too much effort for people to be able to work towards relationships. And I think that's why you see a lot of, I mean, the divorce rate is what, 50-50?
Yeah,
something like that, which is crazy. Or you hear people go, oh, if it doesn't work out, let's get divorced. Like, it's just that mentality that people go into what is supposed to be an incredibly sacred thing. Like we always talked about before we got married, never getting divorced, never even joking about divorce.
Not for the sacred reason. That seems too religious.
No, like sacred,
More,
sacred in the sense of like sacred to us. It's like we've made this commitment to each other, and it's a commitment we've never made to anybody else and will never make to anybody else.
I think I'm so stubborn that I would never divorce you because I said I would never divorce you. So no matter how bad it got, I would just be like, I'm sticking through with this because I said I was.
I don't know why, but that annoyed me.
Okay. In what ways did we work to create the one for each other rather than waiting for the perfect person to come along?
I think we just fought for each other. And I think when you hear that, sometimes people are like, well, that's an unhealthy relationship if you had to fight for each other. But like, it's no, you have to. We're so nuanced as human beings, and we've all got so much baggage, especially as you reach like your early 30s, 40s, 50s, whatever it is. And that old saying of like, we wake up every day and we choose each other, that's so true. Because you have to in a marriage. You have to wake up and choose each other, and I think that's how we make each other the one. Like, yeah, I never believed in the one for me, but when I look at our marriage, even though it's definitely not perfect, it's perfect for us. And it's in a constant state of work and progress, which I love. I think it's so beautiful to be challenged by somebody and challenged by circumstances and experiences where we're just continuously growing. Sometimes I'm like, okay, I've grown enough just for like the last couple of days. But also at the same time, would I rather be doing it with anybody else? No.
What did I say the other day to you? I said, whenever times get tough, I always think about what it was like without you while we went to a breakup, or what life would be like without you moving forward. And instantly I'm like, no. My life's way better with you in it, and I choose that route. Do you want to go?
I think it's still you.
Still me. We know how much I hate asking the questions.
I know, but I just.
But because it's just the two of us, I guess I'll do it.
Perfect opportunity.
Okay, so there's the 4 Horsemen of the Apocalypse.
This I was really interested in.
Okay, so this is another Gottman, I guess, tidbit. So they say that there are these behaviors that, if present, I'm going to read that again.
Okay.
See, Joey's going to cut this out.
I'm going to cut it.
They say that there are these behaviors that, if present, indicate the demise of a relationship. Criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling. That's intimidating right there off the bat. So question. The Gottmans identified 4 communication habits, which are, like we just said, criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling that predict divorce. Which of these do you think we've struggled with most, and how can we be more mindful in addressing it? I think I know the answer to this.
Can I be honest? Can I be brutally honest? I think that my problem is criticism.
Definitely.
Okay, you need to be so aggressive with it. I think I come off sometimes as is criticizing, even though it's really my way of, in the same way that you do with me, in trying to push us to be better, right? And I think that sometimes, even in the smallest of ways, it can come off as criticizing, and I catch myself doing that. And then I feel really bad because I understand that like nobody on this earth wants to be criticized, especially within a marriage, right? Like you don't want to feel like you're constantly under fire, you're constantly doing something wrong. And I think a lot of the conversations that we've had after argument, you've expressed that to me. You said, hey, it just feels like you're always telling me that like everything that I do is wrong. It feels like nothing I can do is right. I'm like, that breaks my heart because that's not my intention. So I think that's something that I struggle with and I'm trying to get better at. And I think that you are...
You're going to answer mine?
Yeah.
Oh, man.
And then you can say the same thing. And I think you struggle with defensiveness.
Yeah, well... Now I'm going to get defensive that you said it for me.
I knew that was going to happen.
Yes, definitely defensiveness. And I think before I met you, I wanted to win every argument and I wanted to win every battle. And I had to win. And even when we first got together, whenever there was an argument, I made my case why I was right. And then as our relationship grew and I grew so much respect for you, I realized, okay, if I want to win an argument, that means that she's going to lose the argument. Mm-hmm. So why would I want the person I love most to lose? And what does winning the argument even mean? So I think that's kind of where I've tried to do a better job of my defensiveness is be like, okay, internally I'm being defensive and I really want to win, but at what cost? And it's not that important. And I'm trying to not be as defensive. And you have to attest from where I started to where I am now.
Oh, babe, eons. And I've gotten better with criticism as
No,
well.
I understand.
Rude. So fucking rude. But yeah, but it's also, I think what you just made a really good point that perhaps could be helpful to other people out there is like, in a marriage, there's no winning, or there's only losing. If both people are trying to win, or if one person's trying to win, everybody loses. I think trying to come at that old saying, love cliches because they're cliches for a reason, but like it's you against the problem, not you against each other and the problem. And I think keeping that, I mean, granted, we've only been married with less than bloody 2 years, and so we're still very much within the learning process, but I think that's why it's so fun for us to be able to give advice to other people because we're in real time going through it.
100%. So when faced with difficulties, how do we remind ourselves that no relationship is perfect? How can we reinforce our commitment to each other even when things get tough?
Ooh. Do you have an answer?
To reinforce the commitment when things get tough? Yeah, I think that you do a great job of sitting down, calming the situation.
Looking you in the eyes.
And I think the easiest thing that you say is like, one day this week, you don't put all the pressure on everything in that moment. You say, okay, things are getting tough this week, whether it's work, whether we're juggling a lot of things. One day this week, we need a date night and we need to reconnect. And I think it's awesome because you're not trying to solve the problem right there. Because if you're trying to solve the problem while things are a little chaotic and you're in a busy atmosphere, it's probably not the best. But you just say, okay, so at some time in the near future, in the next few days, we just need to resettle and reconnect. And I think that quells all the issues in the short term, and it gives excitement of how to fix those things in the long run, because you get excited for a date night. You get excited to, oh, you know what? She's right. I actually can't wait to have a date night and just reconnect and talk about, you know what? I love your eyes, babe. You're so beautiful. Like, let's talk about your day.
I think sometimes, in fact, a lot of the times when you're having issues, and granted, we have a very unique situation because we live and work together, but when you're going through moments like that, I think it's just indicative of the fact that you're not as connected as you should be, right? And I think pulling it back down to just something as simplistic as a date night, being like, let's go and sit in front of each other, connect with each other again, because then I feel like we can resolve anything. And then I feel like we can work through anything in a really calm, cool, collected manner. It's just right now we feel disconnected from each other, and so we're kind of fucking at arms with each other.
Yes. Okay, this is the third one. And this one is interesting. I don't know where this one's going to go.
A doozy?
So it's affairs and recovery.
No, I don't know about that.
So they share how infidelity, while damaging, can sometimes serve as a turning point for stronger relationships if handled with care. You're already shaking your head.
No.
No threesomes in the future for us?
It's not cheating.
So the question. I said no threesomes in the future for.
I said that's not cheating. That's not an affair.
Oh yeah, they want you to cheat. Oh yeah.
They don't want you to cheat. They're
saying cheating is good for you.
They're not saying.
Yeah, they are.
They are not in any way, shape, or form saying cheating is good for you. They're saying if it does happen, if it's handled with care, then there is.
It can make you stronger.
There is light at the end of the tunnel.
But if you want your relationship to be stronger, why not cheat if there's the possibility that it could be stronger?
Do not listen to him.
Let me read the question.
Horrific.
Who knows? Okay. So the episode touches on how couples can recover from infidelity. Although this isn't something we've faced, what do you think is the most crucial element in maintaining trust in our marriage? Trust is a big thing for us. So I'm really curious because we have come such a long way with trust, both from a small mistake I made in the beginning, but also from the fuckwits that you dated before me.
Yes. Fuckwits
So I'm curious
is the correct term.
How you handle that now.
Well, this is two-pronged. So perhaps because of my past and because of my parents' relationship and my childhood, I really find infidelity and affairs as an absolute end of day, no coming back from type of deal breaker.
No chance.
And I've expressed that to you multiple times because I've always said if you were unhappy, then we needed to end the relationship. That was the most respectful way to be able to go about that. And if you were to go behind my back, and whether it was emotional, physical, or a combination of both, you've broken that trust irrevocably, and they would never be able to get it back because I would constantly be looking over my shoulder. And we've already discovered that when we weren't even engaged or married, when a little blip in the road happened. And then how long did it take for us to be able to claw our way back from that.
A long time.
A long time.
It was a Ross and Rachel situation because we were on a break.
It wasn't a Ross and Rachel situation. Anyway, it kind of was, but it wasn't. But I think you do a really phenomenal job. A really, really phenomenal job at reassuring me a lot of the time. And I don't think it's as heavily needed anymore as it once was. But I think that you understand that the need to reassure me isn't because I'm being needy, and it's not because like I'm just a bitch. Like it's you understand that where it comes from and how it helps our relationship. Like when you over communicate your plans for that day, or when you're going out with your mates, and you're like, hey babe, just sitting here, and like without me even having to ask you to send me a picture, because you know that it quells my brain. It doesn't allow my brain to go off on all of these other tangents of like, I wonder what he's doing and how he's doing it and blah, blah, blah. And you also show me that through example when I go out with my friends. You don't have a lick of jealousy. Not that I've ever given you any reason to be jealous, but you don't have a lick of that. And that in turn helps me remember that like, okay, so our marriage is so solid and so strong, and nothing can shake that. Nothing can waver that. So why am I sitting there worrying about these like very far-fetched what ifs?
And I think now, because you are so ingrained in the business, you actually believe me when I say, when do you think I would ever even have the time to cheat on you? Like the amount of energy it takes to cheat on somebody, like it's a lot.
I mean, you're a smart man. You'll figure out a way.
No. And also, I think you always told me if I ever had any urge or something, you're like, just tell me, maybe we could have a threesome. That's where the threesome came
That's where the threesome came from.
Yeah, okay.
But I feel like that in of itself, I think is something very interesting, and what a lot of people don't talk about. Like granted, like I perhaps am a little bit more open to that situation than other people. But I was thinking to myself, I'm like, if you felt like if there's something lacking in our relationship sexually, or like that kind of connection, then, and we really didn't feel like we could work it out in between us, like what is the harm of stepping outside of the relationship together and seeing if that was a possibility? But I think the more and more you think about it, the more and more you don't like that option. Hey?
I'm not a threesome kind of guy. I could barely keep it with you.
Yeah.
But ladies, if you're listening, go into Hannah's DMs, send us your photos.
Fuck up. That was funny. That was one of your funnier moments.
I'm getting pretty funny.
You are.
Because I'm just so not funny. And I'm getting my dad jokes, because I'm getting to be the age of an actual dad, is becoming a real thing. So the dad jokes are making me funny.
I've never thought about it that way.
It's true.
Oh my God, that's so true.
People have been laughing at me a lot lately.
I'm really happy.
Like with me.
I was going to say, are they laughing at you or with you?
Me.
I'm really happy that you're coming into your own in that way.
Yeah. So they suggest that an affair can sometimes save a relationship. What do you think about this perspective, and how would you handle such a challenge in our marriage?
Nope, and I would divorce you.
Okay.
That's my answer.
I honestly don't even want to go too much farther into this conversation before it turns into an on-air fight. So cool.
How would you handle it?
If you cheat on me? Mm-hmm. Nah, yeah, I'd be out.
See, that's what I'm saying. I think we're both on the same wavelength there, because I think that we have so much respect for each other and so much love and trust in each other that if that happened, then how would we ever build that back? I would never respect you again. I would never trust you.
One thing my mom told me when we broke up once, she said, okay, here's the test. Think about, and it was pretty bizarre. She said, think about how you would feel if Hannah had sex with somebody else. And she said, if you don't care, that means she's not the one, which is fine. If it really bothers you, that means that there's something really there. And I was like, yeah, it would really bother me. And she's like, okay, then maybe that's
She's
a sign
the love of
for
your
you.
life. Love you so much, Jackie.
Yes. Okay, last one from the Gottmans. Managing conflict. So a major point they brought up is 69% of conflicts in a relationship are perpetual problems. The Gottmans argue it's less about resolving these issues and more about managing them effectively. Understanding how couples navigate recurring conflicts can highlight their emotional intelligence and adaptability. I love this one.
Me too.
Because I feel like same thing that we spoke earlier, like there's always conflicts when we argue. It's like the same thing.
It's exactly the same things.
And I feel like understanding that it's not that it's not going to get better, but that we just have to deal with it in a better way. It's kind of like the compatibility thing. You're never going to like sports, or I like sports. You're never going to like doing a sweat class like I like doing a sweat class.
You just don't want to go to the same ones that I want to go to, but yeah.
But this is really helpful, because maybe a lot of people out there are thinking, oh, you know what? I'm fighting my partner for the last 6 months about the same thing, and it's getting nowhere. And maybe that's not a bad thing. You guys just need to rewire your brains and figure out, how to deal with it. My question is, What perpetual issues do we face in our relationship, and how have we learned to manage them over time without feeling resentful?
I think we're both really stubborn. And I think that we're both very strong-willed
Give a
people.
specific, though.
I'm trying to think of like a specific. So let me finish my train of thought.
Okay.
And so we're both very strong-willed people, and I think that we tend to get in a lot of arguments when we butt heads of opinions, whether that be something as simplistic as how to run the podcast, or something as simplistic as how we're going to travel. Like something that I always like just annoys the absolute fucking shit out of me is that you're so fly by the seat of your pants, and I'm such a detail-oriented human being, and that's just the way that we are. We butt heads about it a lot because you're like, I want to book the plane ride the day before. I'm like, I want to book the plane ride 2 weeks before, and I want to know exactly where I'm sitting, and I want to be at the airport 3 hours early. But I think that in that particular example, like we've gotten so good at going like a compromise of the two, of understanding like where that middle ground is that makes you feel comfortable and that also makes me feel comfortable. How about you?
Actually, I'm going to give my perspective on this question.
Okay.
If you don't mind.
I don't.
So the question is, what has been the hardest conversation we've had as a couple, and how did we handle it? And I would say that what comes to mind first is one of the first things we spoke about was the only reason I would not be with you or anyone that I really loved is if they were pulling me away from my dream.
Mm.
And because First Rounds on Me takes so much time and energy from me, and it's like I do have two lives. I have you and I have the app. At times, not that you'd get jealous, but you would get very frustrated and say, you don't like how much time it occupies my brain and how much I care about it. And I think one of the hardest conversations we had, which we haven't had in a long time because we've come to an understanding, is I want to do this. This is my dream, this is my passion. And if you can't deal with that, it would be the only reason I would actually say like, okay, then maybe this isn't the relationship for you because it means a lot to me. Like my goal and my dream as a kid or as a young adult was to live out a passion of mine. At first it was sports. Obviously that didn't work out. And then this became a really, really big passion of mine. And for someone to take me away from that, I would just think, okay, you're not the right person for me.
Yeah, I think that even hearing you say that now kind of gets under my skin a little bit because I think to the unevolved mind or ear that would go, well, he cares more about that than he cares about you, right? And sometimes I do feel that way. But I also understand how strong of a human being I must be to not only go, all right, this is your fucking dream and this is the person I love and they love this and like I want him to succeed. I want him to follow his dreams and follow his passions. But I also think within those conversations we sat down and said, well, what's the compromise though? Where is the give and take? Because it can't always you just be taking and taking and taking, this app taking everything out of our life. Because even now, 95% of our life is based around the app. And sometimes it's really draining. Sometimes it's really hard to be able to compete with that and to deal with that. But I also think that it's part of what makes our relationship so wonderful. Because I know that one day far off in the future, if we ever decide to sell the app or move on from it or do something like that and I had the same passion, then you would know 100% how to support me and you would throw your full weight behind me the same way that I threw my full weight behind you.
I can't wait for that.
Neither can I.
Man, to be a stay-home dad when we're rich. Cannot wait.
He's so fucking rude that you get to do it when we're rich and I'll have to do it.
Well, you met me when I had the idea first. If it was vice versa, I would have done it.
You don't know if I don't have
But I think it's not, and I like what you said because it's not a competing thing. It's a quality in you. I was attracted to, okay, this person is strong enough to be able to deal with my passion. And that was something I was looking for in a partner. So it's more of a quality in you than you versus the app and my attention.
It takes an immense amount of sacrifice. It really does. Like we talk about this sometimes. I think you get like a little hurt when I say that because you're like, I don't want you to have to sacrifice everything. But the reality is it does. It takes a lot of sacrifice. But I think it's a sacrifice that's well worth it. When I get to see your stupid smiling face at every event or at the end of every day knowing that you're making your mark on this world.
All right, enough of me asking questions.
All right, I'm going into it. Okay, so the next episode of Diary of a CEO featuring Dr. Orion Taraban. He's a clinical psychologist known as the dating doctor. Love that, dating doctor.
I thought I was the dating doctor.
No, he is. There are a couple of key things I wanted to explore here. So Dr. Terracotta emphasizes start that again. There are a couple of things I want to explore here. Dr. Terracotta emphasizes treating dating like a job search, which I found so fascinating, advising men and women to actively market themselves by sending out resumes, aka dating profiles, to increase their chances of success. I can't fucking speak right now. So if dating is seen as a job search, what do you think some of the resume mistakes people commonly mistake? Holy shit. Wait a second. If dating is seen as a job search, what are some of the resume mistakes people commonly make in their dating app profiles, and how do you think they can correct them to stand out in a positive way?
I think a big mistake, which is actually the opposite of an actual job resume, is they overpromise and underdeliver. Because on an actual job resume, I highly recommend overpromising, because you'll figure it out on the fly, and you should boost yourself up a lot for a job. But in a relationship, we always overpromise, and then when the real us comes out, which is probably great, the other person is underwhelmed because they had such high expectations for us. And the difference between a job and a partner is that you're going to be in the thick of it every day with them, whereas in a job, you get lost. You could just float around and fake it. In a relationship, you can't do that.
Nope.
And the truth's going to come out way quicker in a potential relationship than in a job. And you have so many protection rights and laws in a job, so it's like nice. But I would say, getting back to the core of this, try and be your true self and like say things that you actually like. Don't say, oh man, I need a guy who could elevate me and lift me up on my Sunday morning hike. It's like, okay, that's generic, that's simple, that's basic, but like, what do you actually like?
But also, do you go on a Sunday morning hike?
Yeah, exactly. Like, what do you like? Say what you actually like and what you actually expect, rather than the cliche answer or what a guy wants to hear. Yeah, of course, a guy wants to hear like, yeah, my typical Saturday night is I have a glass of wine and read a book by a fire. Yeah, it sounds amazing, but do you actually like that?
Full of rose petals.
Because if you start dating somebody and your typical Saturday night is getting drunk at the club at 2 a.m., which is totally fine, the guy's going to be like, wait, I thought your typical Saturday night was drinking a glass of wine by the fire. I really wanted to do that with you, but you're at the club getting drunk, and that's not me.
Yeah. Great advice, darling. You should be the dating doctor. You really should. So in the context of dating as a job search, what are some interview techniques that you think can be applied to first dates to make a good impression without feeling overly rehearsed?
Yeah, so I think you should have non-negotiable questions that you want answers to. And I think the first one is, what are you looking for? I think that maybe should happen before you even get on the date. But even when you're on the date, reiterate that, like, hey, we're on a first date. There's no pressure. If this is nothing to you, that's totally fine. We're just gonna have fun. But what do you actually looking for? Like, what's been the last couple of months of your relationship history? Like, what's going on? And I think that could really set the expectation for a great start of a date, where if they're honest and they say, yeah, I'm just looking to have fun, you go, okay, I'm not gonna divulge and I'm not gonna really care too much about this date. I'm just gonna relax and have fun. If they do say, hey, I'm looking for a potential partner, maybe that creates some excitement in you and you're like, okay, I'm going to take this a little bit more serious. So I think having some questions that you just really want the answers to protect yourself are important. And I think paying attention to how they act, that's not directly tied to you. How do they act around their surroundings? And it's very cliche to say, how do they treat the waiter? But how do they do everything? How do they have wandering eyes? Because
are they constantly checking their phone? Are they not? I mean,
are they asking you questions?
Yes.
That's a big one for me. Like, I always put so much thought into getting to know somebody, making them feel it's all about them. But it was also kind of rude if once in a while they didn't ask me a question, and I was like, okay, I'm not just going to sit here and interview you. Like, you have to show some interest in me, or else what's the point here?
I remember when Abby's boyfriend was like, oh my God, Joe asks such thoughtful, in-depth questions. And I was like, he really does. It was so sweet.
I'm probably so annoying because, as you know, every time we meet somebody new, I'm fascinated to get to know them.
Tell me your entire life story.
Because you know what? I like people feeling like they feel heard and seen when they're in my presence. That's what I like.
I think it's really beautiful quality of you, darling, one of which that I very much fell in love with. All right, so he goes into, and I hope this is a he. It is a he, right?
I think so.
Okay, good.
They, you could say they.
They?
We're in LA.
There you go, they. Dr. Terracotta says that men and women approach dating differently. Pretty fucking obvious. Women are more likely to have emotional responses, while men tend to focus on actions and logic. I call fucking bullshit on that. First
That
and
men
foremost. Tend to focus on actions and logic when going about dating. So like women are a little bit more emotionally responsive, men are actions logic focused, which I feel like is this, I mean, I'm not a scientist, but like men, there's this long perpetuated myth that women are wholeheartedly emotional and men are wholeheartedly logic, and I just think it's the biggest load of bullshit ever. Like, you're so emotional. You don't think that you are, but you're so bloody emotional. And you often lead from emotion as well. Perhaps not as much as I do, but I think it's definitely very, very heavily steeped within that. Do you not agree?
No, I definitely disagree. The more you read that, the more I understood what you were saying. And I do think that so I'm going to make sure I say this clearly.
Good.
Men are not smarter than women.
You're
But
not.
when it comes to thinking about things quickly, holistically, we do think calculated wise and logic of like, okay, this is a first date. Maybe the woman is thinking, oh, this feels right. This feels like love. I'm invested. When a guy is thinking, okay, you live 45 miles away from me. You have a kid, which is fine, but I don't really want kids. So although it does feel good, logically, this isn't for me. And that's kind of what I think he means, which I definitely agree with, where maybe you guys...
Okay, then that I
Yeah, you
understand,
guys are
yeah.
so in the moment and just feel what's right. Whereas we think, okay, how can this go where it's going to go in a logical way?
All right. Yeah, I mean, that's fair. I agree with that. All right. Dr. Taraban actually touched on the challenges for men within dating, which I thought was really interesting. And so I want to ask you a couple of questions surrounding that. So they said that many men feel invisible in the dating world, especially if they don't fall into that top 10% of physically and socially attractive men. What advice would you give to those who struggle with feeling overlooked?
Yeah, I think, see, men do suffer, especially in the dating world.
Poor men.
Yeah, I think that this kind of goes back to the whole intentionality of dating overall, because only these 10% of, let's call it, quality men get all the likes. That's because we live in a superficial world where it's all swipe based off of the metrics of somebody. How do they look? How tall does their profile say they are? What are they doing in their pictures? Are they living this luxurious life? Oh, that's the guy I want. So they're getting all the swipes. When in reality, and I think I spoke to Jonathan about this today, like, women like a funny guy. They don't want a tall guy. Women like a chivalrous guy. They don't want a rude guy. So it's like nothing to do with the metrics really matter. And I think we're trying to help combat that, where we're making people be more intentional overall and get into real life on a date, because for those 90% of guys that aren't getting the likes on social media, be more attractive in person and be more confident in person, because the more you say hello to the right quality women, the odds are going to spike for you, because they're going to see, oh, he's actually funny. He's sweet. He's chivalrous. He has great morals and values. And that has nothing to do with the top 10%. All men have those qualities, and you just have to be able to present them in person. So if you're in person, be yourself, be confident, because you have a great chance.
Dr. Taraban, I think you've officially been replaced as the dating doctor.
Wow.
Joe for Manila. All right, darling, last but certainly not least, a recent and captivating episode of the Shetty podcast featuring Andrew Huberman. The duo explored the fascinating intersection of neuroscience, relationships, and dating. They dove into how our brains are hardwired for connection, revealing the critical role of trust, emotional regulation, and small everyday actions in fostering meaningful relationships. So we kind of touched on trust a little bit earlier, but I think it's very interesting to talk about the crossover of predictability and trust, right? So like the consistency that comes in with trust and how that all kind of fosters it. So Huberman mentions that trust is built through consistent behavior. What are some small everyday actions that you believe contribute to this sense of predictability in our own life?
Yeah. So this one, when I listened to this podcast, really hit home because predictability, I think from what he explained, from what I understood, is your experience in life. So if you have a great support system and a great predictability of how things could turn out over time, essentially, I think it's like having a safety net where, not that you need me, but if things don't go well, my family's going to be there for me. I have a lot of my brothers, right? I have such a great support system. So I predict that if something bad were to happen or this went sideways, I predict that I'll be totally fine because of my support and because of my connection elsewhere in the history of my life. And what?
And I'm listening.
What?
I just don't even like to imagine us anything going sideways, but yes.
But to say, for example, anybody.
Yeah.
Where the predictability and history of your life, you see what your parents went through, you see your past relationships, and I don't want to speak for you, but this is what I thought. If you were to see something happening or things going awry, maybe you would jump to that conclusion quicker, but also you'd get a little bit more worried on, oh, I know I'll be fine if things didn't work out with Joe and I, but how would it go? And maybe that would make you super anxious of, I don't even know where I would go to first. Like, I don't know. There's a lot of uncertainty. And I think that's what he was getting to, which was so fascinating to me on start with your own comfortability of building strong relationships with your friends, with yourself, because then everything else gets easier in a relationship. But if those baselines are not there, I think you'll get anxious because you're not going to be able to predict and feel comfortable with what's to come in the future. Does that kind of make sense? I know I was all over the place there.
No, it did make sense. It made a lot of sense. And I think it always kind of comes back to that's the old adage of like it's who you surround yourself in and the support system of which you have that kind of makes it ease of living life. Like I tell you all the time, I'm like, you're so lucky. You're so, so lucky. And sometimes I don't think you realize how lucky you are to have such a strong family unit and have the ability to be able to like talk to your parents every single day. And you're right. Like think if anything went wrong in this world, whether it's to do with us, whether it's to do the app, like anything, you would be okay because you would be surrounded and lifted up by the community around you. Whereas I left my home country when I was 17 years old. My parents are divorced. I have spent such a long time being isolated and solitary because of the nature of my past job. And I also, because of all of that, I struggled to make long-term connections with people because I've never had the opportunity to do so. And so, yeah, I think about that. But then I also think on the flip side, like my consistency and predictability almost in a way is being by myself. Like I'm so good at being by myself. I'm so good at being alone that it's scary. But also I know that in some way, shape or form, I would be okay.
Yeah, and I think that's great in a way. And I think it's bad in a way for human beings to be great on their own because humans are pack animals and we're supposed to be better together. And I think because we're so digitally connected, but we're so personally, humanly isolated, we're becoming so great on our own. And maybe that's really detrimental to the world because the world needs us to be connected. And I think we see that through sociological issues and political issues. We're all thinking about our issue. We're not thinking about the collective. And it's scary.
No, I agree. I think it is scary, but I also think it's scary to have too wide of a net of human beings around you as well. I think there's a really sweet, happy medium of like, I don't think it's good to be okay to be by yourself because it doesn't allow you to grow as a human being and be naturally challenged in a way that you would around other people. But also having like this large group of people around you. I think a lot of people in Los Angeles fall prey to that where they've just got, I know fucking 150 people. I'm like, do you really know them though? And do they really care about you? Or you're just expending energy in a bad way. So you're up, darling.
Yes, that's a great segue into combating loneliness. So one of the things he touched on, which I found interesting, was combating loneliness in both dating and full established relationships. So how do you think loneliness can manifest in a relationship even when partners spend a lot of time together?
I think when they're not emotionally connected. You could be physically next to somebody and still feel like a million miles away. My mum actually used to say that about my dad all the time, was the fact that they would be next to each other all of the time. But she was like, I felt like he was fucking 10 blocks down the road. This
is one of the things that I think you really learned. You know how Jay Shetty always talks about the gifts and gaps in a relationship? I think this is one of the gaps that your parents had that you're trying to fix with us, which is great because we spend a lot of time together. Sometimes we're just sitting there on our phones and you'll proactively say, hey, I know we've spent the last 24 hours together straight, but we've literally spent no time together because I'm on my phone, you're on your phone. Let's just get off our phones and connect here. And I think, yeah, it's great.
I think that's how it manifests itself. And then I think people get really, you know, if one person's not kind of aware of that, then they'll be like, well, what do you mean? We just spent 24 hours together. I'm like, but you haven't. You really, truly haven't connected with each other. And emotional intimacy is perhaps far greater of importance than physical intimacy in any way, shape, or form.
And it leads to physical intimacy.
Damn straight it does. Oh, love that you learnt that.
What are some of the small gestures you believe can make an impact in reducing feelings of loneliness in a relationship?
You kind of just hit the nail on the head with what I said. I think just like making it very aware, but also not coming at it as an attack either. Coming at it from a point of view of just being like, I want to spend more time with you, and not I want to spend more time with you sitting next to you on the couch. I want to spend more time with you doing an activity that we both enjoy, or reading like something as silly as like reading the same book, where you can like talk about it afterwards and you can have those like constructive conversations. I think that's really beautiful. Or even something as simplistic as like taking Deli for a walk at nighttime. 5 minutes.
I put all the clothes away yesterday.
Oh my God, I loved you so much. It kind of like, it turned me on a little bit. I'm not going to lie.
I'm just here to help. There were a few other questions, but babe, we ran out of time.
Oh my God.
We've absolutely crushed it.
I love that an hour goes by so quickly with us.
Yeah. It's been amazing. We have to do this more often.
Heck yeah.
And I do want to shout out Mr. Huberman, Dr. Orion, the Gottmans, and of course Jay
Dr.
Shetty.
Gottman's.
Dr. Gottman's. And I know Jay Shetty's probably like, I can't receive credit for this because I work with Match.com,
But we
which
love
is fine. But I was a fan of yours before that. And yeah, I appreciate everybody listening.
Yeah.
This was amazing. Please subscribe. It goes a long way for us.
Do it.
We love you, and we will see you next time. And happy dating.
Happy dating.